This is Lady B, and this week I am finally making that ginger cake I had mentioned in a previous video. It was something very popular for holidays, especially between, say, 1780 and 1840, and then, of course, continuing on until today. We still actually use gingerbread cookies for Christmas, and this actually all has the same origin. I suspect that what we call spice cake now was originally ginger cake. The recipes look very similar to me. But the reason I mention specifically 1780 to 1840 is because during that time period, they used for leavening something called pearl ash. Now, if you've heard of potash, then you might know a little bit about this. Potash is basically lye or like substances that were used for various things that was liquid collected from soaking ashes. Well, if you took that liquid and instead of just letting it run through the ashes but you let it soak for a couple of days, and then you sift out all of the ashes, the remaining solids, and then dried the liquid so that you got little salt in it, you would have pearl ash, which was basically a potassium carbonate. But the potassium salts, because it wasn't just potassium carbonate. Most of it was potassium carbonate. And they would use this for leavening between 1780 and 1840. The problem is that pearl ash is very bitter. So they would combine it with spices and things that could cover up the bitterness. And ginger was a special favorite. I have here a reproduction cookbook called The American Frugal Housewife, originally printed in 1833. And it has a recipe for this. Now, I mentioned gingerbreads at Christmas and spice cake, but originally these were considered to be the same recipes. If I go into this book, under common cakes, the chapter is called Common Cakes, the very first entry is gingerbread. They actually called these cakes gingerbread, not cake. And under this, it has 3 different recipes. One is for what they call a molasses gingerbread. One is for a hard gingerbread, which I suspect is similar to our gingerbread that we use nowadays to make our gingerbread houses and so forth. And then the last is a cake of gingerbread. All 3 right here on page 70. And it mentions, of course, using the pearl ash because this was before 1840. Now, the reason 1840 is significant is because that was when they very first started, the year they very first marketed something called, see if I can remember how it said, saleratus, something like that. But it was potassium bicarbonate. They removed the bitterness. They got rid of all the things that made it bitter. Further, they took the potassium carbonate, the salt pearl ash, and they further purified it and made the potassium bicarbonate out of it and later sodium bicarbonate out of it, which eventually in around the 60s got replaced with the baking soda that we use now. So this was the evolution of our baking soda. It all started with purifying potash or ash water, which, ironic, if you like trivia, they found that if you were trying to make pearl ash, the best results was if you burned banana skins because it's high in potassium. So you got more. You got a better result. You got more of it too. So this is where the use of ginger comes from, and the gingerbread and everything else that we use now. Now, on my cards, I did put a recipe on the back. I did not use this one. I love using these old original recipes, but I wanted instead to use something around the time that the card was made. And I have this book called Selected and Tested Recipes, Community Cookbook. And I don't know if this was a professional publication or if a community got together and made this book as fundraisers like we do now. All I know is it was printed in Chicago in, let me pull up the main page, 1928. So it has a recipe in here called gingerbread a la Olga. And I'm pretty sure this is more of a cake than what we call a gingerbread today. It seems to be, but we'll find out. So the very first thing I need to do, according to this recipe, is I need to cream my butter, which I already have here, room temperature, and my sugar. Now it can be white sugar, it can be brown sugar. I am using actually coconut sugar. And I'm adding this 1 cup of coconut sugar into 2/3 a cup of my butter, which this is actually a vegan butter, but you can use whatever you like. And I just need to cream it. Now, I'm doing this by hand because I like doing things the simple way sometimes. But this is much faster if you use a electric hand mixer. Mine is in storage somewhere right now, which is the other reason I'm doing it this way. Pause. There. Even by hand, since my butter was at room temperature, it didn't take very long. That's creamed. Now I'm supposed to add my molasses and my spices. So here I have 1 cup of molasses that will go in. Very, very sticky, as anyone who's worked with molasses knows. My seasonings are 1 teaspoon of ginger, and I have here minced ginger, and 1/4 teaspoon each of cinnamon and clove. So let's mix this in. Now, I used fresh ginger because the recipe didn't say to use powdered or dried. And I know that in older recipes, if it doesn't say that it's powdered or dried, that you should always use fresh. This recipe is so old, it doesn't even have cooking instructions for it. All right, those are mixed in. So, now comes the interesting part. I have here 1 cup of sour cream. Well, it's a sour cream substitute, but we'll call it sour cream. And I have 2 eggs. And I need to break my eggs into my sour cream, beat them in, and then dissolve my baking soda, which calls for 1/2 teaspoon, into this before I add it into this. I've never done this before. Let's see what happens. All right, so sour cream, 2 eggs. I'm going to beat that and mix that together. This is kind of reminding me a little bit of a cheesecake. Though I suppose there are cakes out there that call for sour cream because it makes them more moist, so perhaps that's what this will do as well. There we go. And now, my 1/2 teaspoon, make sure there's no lumps in that, of baking soda. And mix that in. And now that in this. So now we'll mix this really well. Oh, it's starting to smell really good. All right, so that is well mixed. Okay, so my last thing I'm going to add is my flour. Now it calls for 3 cups of flour, but it puts it very interestingly. It says, add flour last and see that the measurement is accurate. Now, I'm going to assume what this means is that, as anyone who makes bread knows, how much flour you actually put in any recipe depends on the humidity in your air and the temperatures and a bunch of other factors that determines how your flour will actually act. So I have measured out 3 cups of flour, but I only have 2.5 cups in my bowl that I'm going to add right away. And I have reserved 1/2 a cup to be added if needed. So, adding my flour first, 2.5 cups. All right. And that is already quite thick. I am not sure if I want to add that last 1/2 cup or not. I think I will. At least some of it. Do a little bit at a time. That looks about right. All right, so I didn't use all 3 cups. I've only used 2 3/4. That looks perfect. There we go. So, now, the recipe, being older, as many of the older recipes does, as I mentioned, does not have cooking instructions. So, based on experience, I have preheated my oven to 350 and I have pre-oiled, buttered, and floured a pan, a 9x13 pan to put it in, and I'm going to go put it up in the oven, and I'm going to start checking it at about 25 minutes. I think it will take between 1/2 hour and 40 minutes, depending, not sure, but we'll find out. Basically, I'm going to cook it until a toothpick put in the middle comes out clean, and then I'll know it's done and I can pull it and let it cool. So I will see you then. And it's finished. Now, it's a good thing I checked it at 25 minutes because it wasn't quite done, but it was really close. I gave it another 1 or 2 minutes and then it was finished. Depending on your oven, it might take a little less, it might take a little more. So say between 22, 23 minutes and 28 would be my guess at 350. So let's give it a taste and see how it turned out. Ooh. Here we have it. Ginger cake a la Olga. Okay, it probably could have been cooked a couple more minutes, so maybe 30 is better. But But if you like it moist, this is really, really moist. And it does taste quite good. That is a really moist cake. And my guess is it's because of using the sour cream instead of milk. I just can't stop eating. That's a good sign. So, if you like ginger, and maybe like historical records too, give it a try. This is so good. Be really good with a little sugar glaze on top, and I think maybe I'll make this for Thanksgiving. All right. So that is everything. Now, I love you all, whether new or old. If you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe, and I will see you next week. Until then, whether making cakes for the holidays of any kind, historical recipes, or whatever it is you do this holiday season, just remember, don't be afraid to suit yourself and make whatever it is you do exclusively you. Originates from the use of, I forgot what it's called. Pearl ash. That's what it was called. I don't actually have to share this, right?